The first time I realized my neighbor had been using my driveway like it belonged to him, I was dragging a suitcase out of my trunk after a delayed flight and running on maybe 3 hours of sleep. I looked up, and there it was. A massive white and blue fishing boat sitting on a trailer dead center across my driveway, like somebody had dropped it there on purpose. For a second, I genuinely thought I had the wrong house. I stood there in the dark, blinking at it, trying to make sense of what I was looking at, and then I saw the registration sticker and knew exactly whose it was. My neighbor, Todd Mercer. That man had parked his boat trailer on my property while I was out of town, and somehow acted like that made perfect sense. My name's Ethan Calloway. I'm 38. I work as a management consultant based out of Raleigh, and my job has me bouncing between cities more than I'd like. Some months I'm home every night. Other months I'm gone 2 or 3 weeks straight. It's not glamorous the way people think it is. Mostly airports, rental cars, stale hotel coffee, and try to remember what city you woke up in. The only thing I genuinely love after a trip is pulling into my driveway and being home again. That driveway mattered to me more than most people would probably understand. When I bought the house in Durham 4 years ago, it was the one thing that made me laugh and say, yep, this is the one. Long concrete drive, wide enough for 2 trucks, lined with oak trees, and just enough space that it felt private. It was simple, quiet, mine. Todd lived next door with his wife Melissa and 2 teenage boys. Nice enough at first glance. Big pickup truck, boat obsession, always had somebody over grilling or yelling about football. The kind of neighbor you wave at, but don't exactly invite over for dinner. We'd always kept things polite. A nod here, small talk there. Never any problems. At least none that I knew about. So standing there at almost 10:30 at night, staring at his trailer across my driveway, felt surreal. I walked over and knocked on his door. He answered holding a beer, barefoot, looked at me, and then glanced past me toward the trailer like he'd completely forgotten it was there. Hey, Todd, I said, that your boat? He shrugged. Yeah, it's parked in my driveway. He actually smiled, not apologetic, more amused. Oh, right. Yeah, I figured you were still out. I just stared at him. I got back tonight. He took a sip and leaned against the doorframe like we were talking weather. Didn't think it'd be a big deal. You're gone all the time anyway. There are certain moments where somebody says something so casually disrespectful your brain kind of pauses. That was one of those moments. You figure because I travel, I asked, that you could just use my driveway? Todd lifted a shoulder. It was empty. Like that explained everything. Like an empty driveway was community property. Then he gave me this little grin and said, didn't think you'd notice. And I swear that line landed harder than anything else. Not because it was rude, because he meant it. He genuinely believed I wouldn't know, or maybe wouldn't care. He turned back into the house before I could say another word. Door closed. Conversation over. I stood there in the porch light, hearing laughter from his living room and feeling that weird calm that hits right before anger fully settles in. I moved the trailer enough to get my car in, hauled my suitcase inside, and sat at my kitchen island staring at my home security monitor. See, when I bought the place, I installed cameras mostly because I travel so much. Front yard, driveway, see the gata, basic stuff. I rarely check them unless a package disappeared or I got a motion alert. That night, I opened the footage archive and started scrolling backward. At first, I figured maybe this had happened once or twice. Maybe he parked there temporarily and got lazy. 20 minutes later, I felt my stomach turn. There was Todd backing the trailer into my driveway. Again and again. Different weekends. Different times. Broad daylight. Rainy afternoons. Early mornings. Sometimes he'd leave it for hours. Sometimes overnight. One Saturday, he had 2 friends standing there loading coolers and tackle boxes onto the boat while laughing like they were staging for a lake trip on their own property. I kept checking timestamps. Going farther back. 10 months. Then 11. Nearly every single week. And the whole time I was traveling for work, catching flights, trying to build a career, this guy had slowly decided my driveway was part of his setup. At around midnight, I leaned back in my chair and actually laughed once. Not because it was funny, because the audacity was unbelievable. Then something clicked. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was routine, deliberate. Comfortable, which meant Todd had probably convinced himself he had every right to do it. And once somebody gets comfortable taking something from you, they don't stop because you ask nicely. The next morning, I called someone I trusted, my attorney Laura Bennett. I'd worked with her during closing on the house, and she specialized in property law. I explained everything. There was silence for a second. Then she said, "Ethan, tell me you still have camera footage." "Almost a year's worth." "Good," she said. "Don't say another word to him until I pull the records." I poured coffee and spent the next 2 hours watching more clips while waiting for her call. By then, the frustration had turned into something colder and much more focused. Todd thought I was absent. He thought absent meant unaware. He thought because I wasn't physically standing there every week, he could claim whatever space looked convenient. And the more I sat with that, the more one thing became crystal clear. He hadn't just parked a boat trailer in my driveway. He'd tested whether I would defend what was mine. And he was about to get an answer. Laura called back just before lunch, and I could hear papers moving around on her desk before she even spoke. "Okay," she said. I pulled the deed, the county survey, and the plat map from when the subdivision was built. Then she paused for effect in that lawyer way she had. "That entire driveway is yours. Every inch. No access easement, no utility carve-out, nothing shared. Clean and simple." I looked out my kitchen window at Todd's trailer, still sitting there like it had every legal right in the world to be parked on my concrete. That's what I figured. "Here's the bigger issue," Laura said. "He's been using private property without permission repeatedly, and based on your footage, comfortably." Comfortably is a good word. She laughed. "Do you want this stopped, or do you want leverage?" I remember staring at my coffee and thinking about that for maybe 2 seconds. "Both." "Then don't escalate emotionally. Escalate structurally." That line stuck with me. Escalate structurally. By Saturday morning, I had a contractor drilling a steel bollard into the head of the driveway near the street. Powder-coated black, thick enough to stop a truck, anchored deep in concrete, and topped with a combination lock. It looked clean, professional, bien manuel, exactly what I wanted. Then I installed a bright metal sign right beside it. Private driveway. Unauthorized vehicle subject to towing at owner's expense. I stepped back and admired how official it looked. Melissa happened to walk outside right, then carrying grocery bags, and slowed down when she saw it. "That seems serious," she said. I smiled. "It is." She looked toward the boat trailer, then back at me. "Todd said you were upset." Todd parked on private property for almost a year. She shifted awkwardly. "I'm sure it wasn't meant like that." "Maybe not," I said, "but that's how it landed." She gave a tight nod and walked inside. 2 hours later, Laura emailed over the letter. "Clean, professional, ruthless. Dear Mr. Mercer, this correspondence serves as formal notice regarding repeated unauthorized use of private property located at, documented across 11 months. Effective immediately, you may choose one of the following. Option 1. Remove all equipment permanently and cease use of driveway. Option 2. Enter into a written month-to-month rental agreement at $195 monthly plus $2, $145 in retroactive fees covering previous unauthorized use. Failure to comply may result in towing, legal remedies, and cost recovery. 72 hours. Certified delivery. Signature required. Todd got the letter Monday afternoon. I know because I watched him sign for it from my office window. He opened it right there in his driveway. His face changed halfway through. Then he marched straight over, knocked hard enough to rattle the glass. I opened the door. He held the paper up like it offended him personally. "What the hell is this? Looks like a letter. You're charging me? You used my driveway. Come on, Ethan." He laughed once like I was being ridiculous. "We're neighbors." "Exactly. This is insane." So I was parking a boat trailer on my property for 11 months. He shook the paper. $2,000. $2,145. For a driveway? For my driveway. He looked at the bollard and muttered something under his breath. "You really put up a barrier?" "Yep." "You can't be serious." "Very serious." He stared at me for a long second. "You were never there." Apparently I was there enough. He left angry. Real angry. Over the next week, he made sure I knew it. Loud conversations outside. slamming truck doors. Pointed comments when he saw me. Once while mowing his yard, he shouted, "Some people care more about concrete than neighbors." I didn't respond. That bothered him more. But the thing Todd clearly expected was for me to eventually feel awkward and back off. Maybe apologize. Maybe decide keeping peace mattered more. Instead, I kept records. Every conversation, every camera clip, every interaction. Laura loved that. "Keep letting him underestimate you," she told me. By day 10, Todd changed tactics. He knocked in the evening, calmer this time. "Look," he said, "this whole thing's getting blown out of proportion." Then remove the trailer. "That's not easy. My side yard's tight. Sounds inconvenient." He sighed. "I just thought since you traveled, you thought wrong. You really need money from me over this?" "It's not about money." He gave me a sarcastic look. "Then why the invoice?" "Because consequences feel more real when there's a number attached." That shut him up. But then something happened he didn't expect. Mrs. Delgado from across the street saw him outside one afternoon and casually asked if everything was okay. Todd tried to spin it. "Ethan's upset over a temporary parking thing." She blinked and said, "Temporary? Honey, that trailer's been over there almost every weekend since last summer." Todd looked stunned. Then Mr. Franklin from the corner joined in. "Yeah, we thought Ethan was renting the space to you." Then another neighbor walking a dog chimed in. "You guys had an arrangement, right?" Todd's face physically changed. I was standing on my porch hearing every word. His version was collapsing in real time. Suddenly, this wasn't him versus me. It was the whole block confirming exactly what happened. That night, Melissa came over alone. She looked tired. "Todd's embarrassed." I nodded. "I imagine he is. He really thought you didn't mind." "Then why never ask?" She didn't answer. "He says the fee is extreme. Parking at the marina costs more." That almost made her smile. "Can I ask you something honestly?" "Sure. If he moves it and apologizes, does this go away?" I thought about it. Then I shook my head. He had 11 months to ask permission. She nodded slowly, like she already knew. After that, things got quiet. Really quiet. No jitting. No knocking. No trailer. Just silence. Then 69 days after the letter, on a Thursday evening right around sunset, I heard a knock. Todd stood there holding an envelope and a folded contract Laura had prepared. Completely different energy than before. No green. No swagger. Just tired. "I read it again," he said, and I'm done arguing." I stepped aside and let him hand me the paperwork on the entryway table. Signed. Every page. Then he slid a check across the wood. $2,145 exactly. I looked at it. Then at him. "You sure?" He let out this dry little laugh. "Apparently, everybody on the street's been watching me for a year." "Seems that way." "Melissa says I should have asked." "Melissa's right." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You really had cameras on all that time?" "Yep. That's brutal. Only if you park where you shouldn't." He actually smiled at that. Not because it was funny, more because he knew he'd walked himself into it. Then he glanced toward the driveway and asked, "So, what's the combo?" I leaned against the doorway. "First payment clears, then you get access." His eyebrows lifted. "Seriously?" "Very seriously." And standing there with the sunset cutting across the porch and Todd Mercer holding his own signed rental agreement in one hand, I realized something kind of satisfying. Some people only respect boundaries when boundaries become expensive. Todd stood there for another second like maybe I was going to laugh and tell him I was kidding, but I didn't. I just held his signed contract in one hand and the check in the other while the evening light stretched across the porch. He looked past me toward the driveway, then back at me and gave one short nod. "Fair enough." Then he turned and walked home. And I'm telling you, that may have been the strangest part of the entire thing. Not the arguments, not the paperwork, not the money. It was seeing a man who had spent almost a year acting like my property was basically an extension of his finally walk away and understand he had no control over that space anymore. The check cleared the next morning. Laura texted me a thumbs up and said, "Proceed as discussed." So that afternoon I walked out to the bollard, punched in the code, unlocked it, and texted Todd one sentence. "Payment received. Access granted under contract terms." 10 minutes later, his truck backed slowly into the driveway, towing the boat. For the first time since this whole mess started, he stopped, got out, and walked over before pulling in. Mind if I park? I looked at him. I honestly almost laughed. That's what rent covers. He nodded, parked carefully, and left. No sorkuts. No assumptions. No attitude. Just business. For a while that became the routine. First of every month, Todd dropped off the payment. Sometimes envelope under the mat. Sometimes handed directly to me. $195 every time. Quiet. Clean. Professional. The whole thing became weirdly normal. But the clause Laura added to that agreement, that part never stopped bothering him. She'd written it in simple language. Miss one payment by more than 24 hours and driveway access is suspended immediately. Bollard locked. Tow service authorized. Storage fees and removal costs paid by renter. Todd asked about it the second month. You really need that in there? Yep. Seems aggressive. So, was helping yourself to private property for 11 months. Third month, he asked again. Same answer. By then, the neighborhood definitely knew the story. I'd be getting mail, and somebody would grin and say, "How's the marina business?" Mr. Franklin loved that joke. Mrs. Delgado asked me once if I was investing the money or just enjoying the principle of it. Truthfully, it wasn't really about the money anymore. Sure, the extra couple hundred every month was nice. But what actually stuck with me was how quickly a person can convince themselves they're entitled to something when nobody pushes back. Todd hadn't started by trying to steal anything. I honestly believe that. He probably parked there once while I was away and figured no big deal. Then he did it again. Then again. Then enough times that his brain rewrote the rule and decided Ethan doesn't use this much anyway. People do that more than we admit. They normalize crossing a line because nobody stops them early. And the longer it goes, the more offended they get when the line suddenly matters. About 5 months into the agreement, we had our first real test. Payment was due on Monday. Nothing showed up. Tuesday morning came. Still nothing. Around noon, Todd's trailer was in the driveway, and the envelope still hadn't appeared. I checked the contract once, mostly for my own sanity, then grabbed the lock. Todd saw me through his front window and came out fast. Hold on, he called. I was bringing it tonight. Due yesterday. It's 1 day. Contract says 24 hours. He stopped at the edge of the driveway. Come on, Ethan. Todd. He exhaled hard and lowered his voice. My son had car trouble. Melissa's car got compromised. It's been a mess. And honestly, for half a second I almost bent. Then I remembered standing in the dark after a delayed flight, staring at his trailer blocking my driveway, while he grinned and said, "Didn't think you'd notice." I spun the combination, dropped the steel bollard into place, locked it. Todd stared. Seriously? Seriously. He rubbed his face. He'd actually tow it. Within 24 hours. We stood there in silence. Then he pulled out his phone, opened his banking app right in front of me, and transferred the payment. Plus a late fee Laura had included. He held the screen up. Sent. I checked my phone. There it was. Cleared pending. I unlocked the bollard. Todd looked half irritated, half impressed. You really don't bluff. Not about property lines. He shook his head and laughed under his breath. Wish I figured that out sooner. Me too. That was probably the most honest conversation we'd had in a year. And weirdly, after that, things got better. Not friendly exactly. We weren't grilling burgers together, but respectful. If his boys had friends parking near my curb, they asked. If I was traveling, Todd kept an eye on packages. Once during a thunderstorm, he texted because a branch had fallen near my fence. We found this very narrow middle ground neither of us expected. Not friendship, just boundaries, finally clear enough to work. And every now and then, I'd catch myself smiling when I pulled into my driveway after a trip and saw that trailer parked neatly in the designated spot, knowing the same space he once treated like free storage had become the most expensive parking space on the street. The irony never got old. Last month, Melissa actually joked about it at a neighborhood cookout. Todd says Ethan runs the strictest boat dock in North Carolina. Everybody laughed, including Todd. He raised his drink and said, "Yeah, well, should have asked permission." And honestly, that got the biggest laugh of the night, because by then, everybody knew exactly what that sentence cost him. Looking back now, I still think about how differently this could have gone. I could have yelled, started a neighborhood war, had the trailer towed on day one, and turned it into pure chaos. Maybe that would have felt satisfying in the moment. But turning the whole thing into a clean legal agreement with real consequences, that changed the power dynamic completely. No screaming, not even fantasy, just boundaries with paperwork behind them. And somehow that landed harder than any argument ever could. So now I'm curious. If you came home and found a neighbor treating your property like it belonged to them, what would you have done? Would you let it slide to keep the peace? Or would you draw the line and make sure they never forgot where it was? Drop your story in the comments, because I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's had a neighbor test the limits, and I really want to know whose side you'd be on here.